Okay, class, and finally I wanted to show you the finished product and kind of talk about what I did. All right, so this paper was written by Marshall Mathers. Anybody know who that is? Eminem. Just kidding. All right, so this is the sample I did. In our first Zoom session, we talked about ways to grab your reader's attention because that's really important. So, what I chose to do is to kind of tell a story, right? When I was a child. So let's go ahead and read through that. Johnny, if you are willing to put in the effort and never give up under any circumstances, you can accomplish anything. Fact is, you'll be better off than most because the people in this country have gotten too damn lazy. Ain't nobody got no grit no more. So that's my hook. So I begin with the quote, and now I'll go ahead and read this. Notice, right, I will begin by kind of explaining what the quote is about, but notice how I slowly transition right to the topic and then to my thesis. These words from my late pa indoctrinated me into the mantra that hard work and perseverance are the key ingredients to accomplish anything in life. For the next 10 years or so, those words rang true. I knew that if I put in the work on the basketball court, shooting baskets until the rim was barely visible, playing pickup games in January even though I couldn't feel the ball because my hands were frozen, or dribbling left-handed, my offhand, the entire 2 miles that separated my house and that old, dilapidated court, and starting over if I lost my dribble, I would someday be playing in the NBA. Some say they dream of becoming a professional athlete. It should be my right here. Look at that. I got to change that. My dream, see what happens when you read it aloud? My dream was a motion picture. A crystal clear, high-definition Blu-ray filled with game-winning shots and champagne celebrations. I'm going to stop there and point out some of the things I did, because this week we are working on a positive phrases, and I just use one right there, right? Right after a motion picture, I have my comma, and I used in a positive phrase to add a detail, a description, right? A crystal clear, high-definition Blu-ray filled with game-winning shots and champagne celebrations. Then suddenly, like a roving blackout during the dead of summer, highlight reel vanished. I think I want to put the. See what happens again when you read aloud. Whoops. All right. Okay. I'm still telling the story, right? I'm still talking about those words that my grandfather told me. This happened the moment I stepped on the hardwood at Tokay High. Suddenly, I was shorter, slower, and skinnier than everyone else. I never even made the team. Now I'm going to slowly transition, right, to explain why my grandfather's words didn't ring true. Paul's words of wisdom had failed me. I highlighted this, right, because this is, notice I'm transitioning from my hook, right, to my topic. I am now aware that grit has its limitations, but the word has not gone away. Now I'm going to explain why it's becoming popular, right? In fact, it has gained momentum in education and become a new buzzword that is used as freely as words like woke and Zoom fatigue. Many education specialists have come to a consensus and believe that grit plays an important role in academic success. I'm going to stop there. So this is important. Again, you have to assume your reader has no idea what grit is. You got to give them a little bit, kind of the backstory leading up to your point. Where am I at? Okay. This idea is dangerous and could create unintended consequences. And now my thesis statement that we just talked about. Although grit is viewed as a requisite for academic success, it could cause tremendous harm for certain groups of populations. Again, this is point 1 from the prompt, right? We have to explain it, explain the concept, and why it's negative. Grit is not a new term. It is one that has been around for several years. What has changed, though, is how widespread the word has become. And that's what I talk about in this paragraph. And then I talk about how, just like I previewed in my thesis, Angela Duckworth and many others have kind of blown it up. Now, one thing that came up in the Zoom was quote sandwiches. So here's an example. So your quotes have to be sandwiched between stuff that comes before it. So you want to kind of set up, just like we did with the background information in the introduction. So think of it this way. I don't know if these kinds of things exist, but there used to be like weekly television shows. And if you missed last week's, or even if you didn't, right, they would kind of do a quick recap, right, to bring the viewers up to speed. That's what you're doing with your quote. So notice how I do that. And I label it here. I put, here's the beginning of my quote sandwich. Also, I'm using in a positive phrase. See, that's why I wanted you to go over these. Here's the top bun, setting up the context and the background. Angela Duckworth, notice your positive phrase, a middle school teacher turned education researcher, has had a lot to do with the word's resurgence. Whether it be her full-length novel Grit, her TED Talk, or her concise article True Grit, Angela Duckworth seems to think that grit, notice how I'm circling back to my hook, those same words from a pa that failed me. So see, when you do that, it kind of creates a unity, cohesion, right? It links everything together, are the answer to our school system's woes. All right? Now, I got my quote. Duckworth defines grit as passion and perseverance for a very long time. Why did I choose this quote? Because remember, this paragraph, we have to explain what the term is. Okay? Sandwich. What does a sandwich have? Top bun, bottom bun. All right? So let's see what I did here. The simplicity of this idea reveals why it has become popular. Looking a little deeper, though, reveals at least one major red flag. It places all the responsibility on the students. If the students can just try harder and become grittier, they can be successful students. Okay, let's see. So basically what I'm doing here is I'm explaining why it's bad for students, right? So remember, your first point, introduce the term, fear factor, male, gender role conflict, whatever. Explain why it's bad. That's what I've done here. And I kind of use this as my bottom bun. And the rest of this paragraph, I'm going to kind of preview more, right, to explain why it's harmful. She claims that grit is a more accurate predictor of success, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so part two, or point number two, is why is it important for students to replace it? And you might find that your part one, your point number one and your point number two kind of might overlap, but that's okay because you want it to flow. You don't want it to be completely different. All right, so my topic sentence, if the idea that possession of grit is the silver bullet education reformists having been waiting for seems too good to be true, because it is. Notice what I did here. So this isn't really a topic sentence. My topic sentence is here. So this is kind of a combo, right? So it's almost like in my body paragraph, I have a hook. There are several flaws with this theory, but the focus should be on how it can potentially have a negative impact on students. Okay, then I'm talking about those gaps in equity, why it's bad, right? Talk about how some schools have these cutting edge technology. Some are still using those Bunsen burners that I used in 6th grade. So that's what this paragraph's about. So that kind of covers that, why, right? Why we have to rid that. Because if you got people thinking, just get some grits, those students that are using those Bunsen burners are going to be at a disadvantage. And then finally, your point 3, what do we do about it? Well, the plug has been pulled on grit yet again. The idea does not have to be completely cast away, though. See, I'm not dismissing it completely. Once the current inequities are addressed, a new buzzword might surface. And that's what I talk about. And I go into more detail. I really go into the, why, to prove the point that we have to create, we have to get rid of these disparities. And I use an example from the masculinities article. Talk about the Latino homeboy, how he's kind of plagued with conforming to a certain kind of behavior, and how, so really then grit doesn't matter. Okay, and that's pretty much it. There is one more thing I want to show you, class, and it was in point number 2. So point number 2, I talk about all of these, the students from the underfunded districts, right? And I'm thinking, my reader might be wondering, why is he doing that? So look what I do to provide a transition. Right here, I ask a question. What does all this have to do with grit? So in the middle of my paragraph, I pause, right? I ask the question, what does all of this refers to everything that I talked about, and then I explain it. So somebody asked one of the questions, how do I become a better writer? You look at how writers use language. And how do you do that? You read. All right, thanks.